All right, hopefully you can see my screen now. We are going to talk about control rig. I wanted to kind of explain to you a little bit how control rig is different from other applications you may have used before to do rigging. Want to go over what is possible today, but in general, I want to go over like the philosophy of the project and what is the vision behind it. And at the end, I want to kind of use your imagination because I want to think about what could be the future in terms of rigging and animating characters in Unreal Engine. So let me see. Very quickly, my name is Jeremy. I'm a senior technical animator at Epic Games. Before that, I worked mostly in the animation industry for the past 20 years between France, Australia, the UK, Spain, and I'm now in beautiful California. On my path, I wrote a rigging system called Gear, and then I moved it to Maya and called it M-Gear that my good friend Mikael is still maintaining today. So I have quite a lot of experience building rigging system for different softwares. I was the head of technical animation at Blur Studio for nearly 10 years. I worked on a lot of cool projects. Blur Studio has been a very fun experience because it's a studio with a lot of big expectations, but tiny budget as well. So you need to be flexible, you need to be efficient, you need to be smart about the way you work, which is personally my favorite. I hate redoing things for the millionth time. I want to automate as much as possible and make the workflow enjoyable. In 2021, I joined Epic Game. I wanted to explore the real-time world. I joined during the Matrix Awaken demo, and I was part of the team that did the vehicle destructions, which was a lot of control rig. And then naturally, I ended up also working closely with the developers on the control rig side. I also experimented with the deformer graph, the class simulation in engine, the mocap aspect of the engine. And I rigged this little guy that you can see in the corner, which is the Bungee Man, which was an attempt to try to do like cartoony stuff in engine. So in short, my passion is to create cool characters for animators and make the process as smooth and fun and intuitive as possible. Briefly, before we jump into control rig, I just wanted to mention that modular characters in engine are made of a lot of different pieces. There's the skeletal meshes. You might have more than one mesh for your character. There's the animation blueprint to take care of all the animation related stuff. And it's not just for games. There's definitely use for animation blueprints to make characters for film as well. The physics asset, if you have anything with a secondary motion to deal with, or even class simulation. We have control rig, which we're going to go over. There's the deformer graph, allowing you to do more advanced deformation for your character. There's the whole IK rig and retargeter aspect of the motion capture, which is getting really to a point where it's really fun to do motion capture in engine and to retarget everything. And then the actual blueprint is kind of this container that brings all those pieces together in engine. So I really recommend you watching the presentation that Jeremiah did last year for the Unreal Fest, where he's kind of showing what are the components of a character and how you can add something to your character. Because unlike an application like Maya, and I'm sorry, I don't have any experience with Blender, so I'm mostly going to compare it to Maya. Unlike an application like Maya, in the engine, we have a lot of different pieces that are combined together when we need them to be combined. So that means that there's different places where you're going to do different things, but there's also the ability to share assets between characters. So you might be able to reuse some work you've done, and we'll go over that as well. All right, so let's not watch that. Let's dive into what is control rig. To me, the way I want to describe control rig to begin with is just its visual scripting to drive the skeleton. So it's not a dependency, and that's the first big difference people need to understand when they dive into that. If you have a little bit of knowledge of scripting, either in Python or in Mel or any other languages, you might see some nodes that you're familiar with. We have variables, we have loops, we have conditions. And it's not a dependency graph in the same way that Maya has a dependency graph. In Maya, when you want to drive the position of an object, you kind of feed the expression. You can say, oh, this object is going to follow this object with an offset. Maybe you can do a multiplication somewhere, but you kind of give it the mathematical expression, and it's got to stick to it. This is not quite the case in control rig, even though sometimes it can look like it, because you can do the multiplication, you can attach things to another, but in reality, you just define a set of commands. You say, hey, do this, then do that, and maybe for all those objects, loop over and get this and do that. So it's more close to doing scripting than doing any kind of work with Maya nodes. Driving skeletons, so that's the output that we use most of the time in control rig, and we kind of have different type of inputs. The one that you're probably the most familiar with is what I call the user input. So any control that you have on your character, you want to grab the IK control of the leg or the hips or the spine. And you move that around, and depending of the position of your control, it's going to solve the rig to be in a certain position. But that's not the only way. You can also use the skeleton itself as an input, and that's also something you can see in Maya when, for example, you have all the corrective joints, any secondary joints that we don't require a direct input from the animator. We just define the position of a joint in relation to other joints. So that's also possible with control rig, and also the game input. And this is where I'm assuming most of you have a background in film. I mean, that's what I've been told, but Unreal Engine is very interesting because we can do movies, but it's also a real-time engine. It's a game engine, and we need to open our minds to what it means and what tools are available for us. So sometimes you can think about things about, yes, in a game I could do this, but we're trying to also understand how they could apply to different use, and doing animation in engine can benefit from some of those things. So what I'm talking about when I talk about game inputs, I recently used control rig to correct the animation of a character depending on the environment it's in. So for example, you can adjust the position of the feet to match the ground plane. You can also, if your character is getting close to an object and needs to look at this object, you can offset the direction of the head to look at this object. Obviously, that has a lot of sense in a game context, but it can also be useful in when we do movies. I wanted to show you this quick example I created. So that's the Bungee Man. I've been told some of you have worked with it, so you should recognize it. And what I very quickly did this morning to show an example is I did this control that's kind of changing the slope the character is walking on. I did that very quickly. It could be done better, but the idea was that I have this animation clip, and my character might be moving on a slope that is different from what I've animated with, and I still want it to look nice when I do that. So very quickly, the graph is just a very few nodes. I'm kind of attaching the hips to the plane, so that the body stays in the same position relative to that control. Then I'm reprojecting the 2 feet. Sorry, it's a little messy, but and then I'm recomputing the IK of the leg so that it still looks like it's a proper IK thing. So very simple example of there is no controls, nothing animation can interact with, but in a context of a game, that can be very useful. And we'll see as well how it could be useful for animation as well. All right, so control rig has 3 main events. We have the construction event, which is kind of the initialization of your rig. It's only run once when you create the rig. And it's very powerful because it lets you build the controls, compute some initial data. Maybe you want to measure the length of something, and it lets you adapt your rig to any proportion. And this is really powerful because it means that you can create one single rig that's going to work with a lot of different characters. As long as the skeleton is mostly the same, you can use one rig to drive all those characters. For example, the MetaHuman library, I think, is made of something like 6 or 9 different body types. I forgot exactly, but there's only one control rig. Even though the length of the joints of the bones might be different, everything is computed from the construction event. Why it's powerful? If you have worked in the animation industry and you worked on some biped characters, I am fairly sure most of the biped characters you used inside your studio are kind of the same rig that the rigger had to rebuild to match the different proportions. Then maybe they're adding extra stuff to make it unique, but the core of your rig is the same. With control rig, we can do the same approach, and we can maintain just one single asset, and this asset can be shared and used by multiple characters all at once. So it's kind of very convenient, because now we can just worry about one part and all the characters. We don't have to go over like 20 characters and rebuild them and make sure that they all have the latest stuff. The forward event will evaluate at each tick, and it's going to solve the skeleton position from the input. So each tick is also important. It's not every frame. It's every time the engine ticks, which is a lot more than every frame. In a game context, it means that we can do all the things I was mentioning before. And inside the sequencer, when you're animating, it also means that the engine is still ticking when you manipulate your rig, or when you play blast or play your animation. And the backward event solve the rig from the input animation that you have. So that's really used mostly for when you have motion captures and you want to bake your animation onto that that animation, and then you want to be able to start tweaking from there. We have a lot of thoughts on that process and on how to make it more efficient, and I'll mention that in the future. So I wanted to show you those events because it's kind of showing you already that control rig is not a dependency graph, because we already have 3 events that are going to do 3 different things depending of where we at in our process. And we could imagine other events. We also have an interaction event. So that event is only triggered when you are interacting with your rig. So when you are moving your control around. I was chatting with the developers about potentially in the future, like having an event that is when you press a certain key, or when you're using a certain tool, like if you have your custom picker UI that you like to work on your animation, you may have some tools in there to switch your character from one mode to another. We could create more events and call those events when needed. And you can do pretty much everything you want, from changing the behavior of the rig to run some actions on your skeleton or on your control. All right, so we're trying to be as procedural as possible. We're trying to make things reusable so that you don't have to do the work many times. So I already mentioned, and you can see that on the pictures on the right, that one rig can be used for multiple multiple characters, and they may have different proportions. That's totally fine, as long as the skeleton is mostly the same. So the rig is independent from the character itself. A good example of that as well is we have what we call the FK rig that I believe works on any skeleton. You can generate an FK rig, and all it's going to do is going to create an hierarchy of controls that is matching the hierarchy of skeleton. So we can generate that rig for any skeleton available, and we don't have to maintain a different rig every time we have a new skeleton. This is just procedural. Adaptive, because you don't have to have exactly the same skeleton. It's a scripting language, and you can put conditions in there. So you can do something where you say, if you find this, then do that. If not, do something else. So for example, you can have the same rig, and let's say you have characters with 4 fingers or 5 fingers. You can write your construction events and even your forward events to take that into account. So you can do something where like if you find the pinky joint, then build the pinky controls. If not, just do nothing. So your rig, again, can be reusable a lot. I would still make a different rig if it's a very different creatures, obviously. But if I can shove more use on my rig, that just to make it adapt to more skeletons, I will do that. That's just one rig I have to maintain compared to having to duplicate. And every time I want to update, I need to go and make sure the update is available on every rig. Flexible, because we also introduced the ability, I believe it's in 5.2, to pass some extra data to the rig, so you can decide how it's built. So you can pass variables to your rig, maybe Boolean or floats values, to tell it that you want the rig to be built in a certain way. We call that data-driven rigs, or it's using the data asset inside control rig. And basically what you can do is you can attach a data asset, which is any variable, any information you want, and pass this information to control rig. Then inside control rig, you can query any of that. And for example, you create a variable that says enable stretch. Maybe this character needs to be stretchy, but that other character doesn't need to be stretchy. And in your rig, it's just really an option. Like you made it so that you can just, with a Boolean, toggle stretchiness or not. Well, now you can say, for that rig, I want to enable stretchiness, and for that other rig, I don't want to enable stretchiness, and still use the exact same rig. So again, being able to reuse things as much as possible is quite important for us. Quick iteration. I love the visual feedback of control rig. We have a lot of debug nodes and things to quickly see what we're doing. We have drawing nodes that allows you to show your transforms on the screen, and you can see if something is pointing in the wrong direction. Every time you plug and plug something in control rig, you see directly the result in your viewport there. So it is scripting like you would do in Maya. You could script a rig system in Maya where you define what needs to be connected to what and all that stuff, but you still have to run the script every time you want to see what's going on. Here in control rig, you have your direct feedback. You can just plug, unplug things and see how it affects your rig. So in that sense, I find it more easy to prototype and try ideas and see what may or may not work. You have access to low-level math, and I put an asterisk on that because I need to confess something. I mean, I love the power of it because I think it's awesome that we can do all type of crazy stuff just going full on with the math. Because in the end, everything you do inside your 3D application, I mean, it's just math. It's just dealing with matrices and rotations and vector position and adding them and subtracting them and doing all that stuff. And this is nicely wrapped in any application under like a constraint, an aim constraint or a parent constraint, or you have a spline and you can attach something to a spline. But really what it is, the spline, it's a Bezier equation, and you're just defining the points of your Bezier equation and where things should be in space. So it's really nice, and I think this is great tools to be able to have an intuitive approach to rigging and attaching things together. It's fantastic, and we have the same nodes in control rig. We have a parent constraint node, we have splines, we have aim, but we also have math, like low-level math, and you can recreate any of that yourself if you want. And yes, it's for technical people. It's for people who feel comfortable with math. I did a few tutorials. You can see them on the top right, where I show you how to recreate what's an IK, like what's the trigonometry you have to use to create an IK. And I get it, it's not for everybody, but for people who wants to have full control over their character, you have the power to just dive into it. I did the same in Maya before, but in Maya, if you want to do that, like for example, I wrote an IK solver for Maya because I like the one that is provided, but it doesn't have stretchiness and it doesn't do certain things that I do on all my rigs. So I ended up going there and writing my own IK solver for Maya, but you have to do that in C++. You have to compile, you have to come back, and you don't have any visual feedback. So you're trying to figure out where you did things wrong. With Control Rig, you see immediately. You plug things, you see the results. And for me, it was so much a more intuitive way of doing this type of more advanced stuff. Again, I don't think that should be for everyone. I don't think you need to do that. I just love the fact that it's possible. And in the end, we can, once you're done with the complex part, figuring out your new IK solver, we can share, you can wrap that into a function and then share it. For example, recently I did a function to do dynamics. So anytime you have like secondary motion on the tail or something, and it took me a couple of days to figure out how to make it work and make it really nice and intuitive. But then I wrapped it all in a function, just exposed a few nodes, and anyone can use it. And I've seen people starting to use it online without any understanding of how I did it. And that's the powerful part. You can dive into it if you want, but you don't have to. Where do you find this tutorial? You can find them on my dev community page, so Jérémie Passerin. Otherwise, I believe we're going to share those slides with you after, and all those vignettes you're seeing are actually links, so you will be able to click on any of those. Could you share the project with us, the character walking? The Benjamin is already shared with everybody. If you want the control rig I just created this morning for the slope, I can post that for sure. It's like 4 nodes that I put together this morning. It's not the prettiest, but that made my point. Cool. So math can be tough. You don't have to know math to do rigging, but it's really nice when technical people can also have this full control. New possibilities. So we try to think about what is the problems that animators have and how they try to fix them, and try to come up with new approaches. We're not trying to recreate a software that already exist. We're trying to come up with new ideas and with the experience that animators have shared with us. So for example, one thing we can do in Control Rig is we can have a completely different behavior of the rig when you are interacting with it, rather than when you're playing your animation. When you are interacting with a specific control, you can have a different behavior than when you're interacting with another control. So an example of that that I did, and again, there's a tutorial if you want to take a look at it. I did a spread of the fingers. So usually the way I did it in the past when I was working in Maya is I would have an extra control that was just for the spread, or maybe a slider somewhere where you could spread the fingers. And what it was is, well, I added like a parent before my control, and I would offset this parent. So it would kind of propagate this offset, but it will not affect the control itself. So the control itself will still believe that it's at 0, even though I just spreaded my fingers, which is fine. But we thought we could try something in Control Rig where I have created a control that we call proxy control. And proxy control are not something you can animate. They don't have key, they don't receive key. You see them in the viewport, but you don't see them in sequencer. And when you manipulate them, you can do stuff with them. And so something I did with the proxy control for my spread fingers is I said, when you rotate the proxy control, take the value of the rotation and divide it among the controls of the fingers. And why we think it's interesting is because now you are really moving your fingers controls, and your curves are still they still make sense, because you are actually affecting those controls. And when you look at your fingers, you don't have to worry about, oh, is the spread done using those controls or those controls? It's always in the same place. So that's an interesting thing we're looking into. The box rig that we did for the Unreal Fest last year is another example of that. And let me show you quickly what this is. Oh, I forgot to show you that. Okay, I'll come back to it. So the box rig has this proxy control, And this proxy controls allows us to rock the box from any point that is the closest to the ground. And again, what it does, it's not just rotating like a parent from that position, it's actually inputting values to that COM control. And you can see here, if I just go back and Control G, here everything is at 0. And when I grab my proxy control, I can move it, and now I get new values on the COM. And it's pretty flexible because I can rock it along all the flaps. I can even close one of the flap. Let me try to grab it and close that. And now it's going to see that the flap is closed and still rotate on that axis. So it's interesting. It's a new way to interact with the character. And we're still trying to find what's convenient, what makes sense, and what is intuitive for the animators. But we see some powerful possibilities there. One other thing I've tried, I don't have an example for that, but imagine you've animated all your animation in FK. Your character is like swinging the arms up in the air, and you did all your animation in FK because it makes sense. It's rotation, so probably what you want to do is FK animation for the arms. And then suddenly you realize that, I don't know, you have a little penetration on the hand and the head, and you want to fix that. Well, so you have to start from the shoulder and rotate everything to get the hands to move just a little bit. Well, this is a typical case where I can now, today in Control Rig, create a control where you're going to grab it, it's going to move like it feels like it's IK, but it's going to propagate the information to the rotation of the FK control. So you can manipulate in IK, but the interpolation is still going to be FK. And I find that extremely powerful because I feel that sometimes you're working in a mode in FK or in IK, and you are in the middle of animation. And when you switch from IK to FK, it's kind of a big decision. You're like, okay, I'm going to switch. I'm going to have to bake my animation, or at least bake for the rest of the shots. And you kind of commit that now you're going to be in IK for a certain number of frames. Well, we are saying now that maybe you don't have to. Maybe your animation makes most sense in FK, but sometimes you want to do a little tweak in IK because it's just more convenient. So that is possible today with Control Rig. Swapping rig in sequencer. Let me see the question. Sorry, I'm reading the question. It's a long question. To you as character. Oh, okay. Rotation in a construction. Okay, we'll get back to that. I want to finish on this, and actually we can talk about that and go back to the example I was looking at. Okay, sorry. Swapping rig. So that's another thing. Again, we're trying to find the best way to do that in the future. There is a way to do it today. I'm not saying it's super convenient, but that shows you the possibility. So technically today in Control Rig, you can start animating your shot. And in the middle of it, you can realize that you want to swap to a different rig. You could bake your animations to an animation sequence, and then bake it back to a different Control Rig and keep going from there. The example I'm always giving is a snake. If you have to animate a snake, snakes are the worst to rig and to animate because, well, sometimes they're slithering on the ground and you really want to have like a motion path that they follow. Sometimes maybe you're holding them by the head and you want the tail to be dangling, so you really want an FK rig there. Or maybe it's raising the head and wrapping around something, so you want some sort of IK rig. I mean, there's not one rig that works with snakes. There's a ton of different things that you need to try. So technically, it would be possible in Control Rig today and in Sequencer to start your animation with Run Rig, find out that in the middle of that shot, you want to swap to a different rig, so you can bake this animation to a different rig and resume your animation from this point. It kind of goes against what I just said with proxy controls, where you want to have direct manipulation. And I'm I think both options are interesting. So a lot of the time, I think direct manipulation can help you, but maybe there's sometimes where you really need to switch to a different rig. And I'll come back to this idea of swapping rig because there's more to it. If we can make it more intuitive and easier to use, I think there's more potential. Okay, so the question was about the skeleton with different rotations on the initial position, and how do I approach using one rig to both. When you have different rotation, it's annoying. You have to store the original offsets compared to your rig. So I don't think there's an easy way to deal with that. But it's still possible. Inside your construction events, you can look at which direction your bones are pointing at, compare it to which orientation you wish they were at, and store that offset, and then restore it when you do your solve. Hoping it's answering a little bit the question. Maybe if I show this mech example, it will also help making sense of it. So Chase Cooper did this rig, which is our mech, which is also available on the marketplace. And this rig is really procedural in the way that what he did, he decided not to rig just piece by piece, but try to make it smart. So for example, here you see that he's looking for all the joints called piston in the rig, and then he's got this piston rig method or function. Here he's looking at, so all the joints he has found, he's taking the one that has a O1 in it, and he's building a control for it, and then he's storing some information about them inside those metadata. So metadata are very useful to store information. As, for example, an original offset would be a good thing to store inside the metadata. And then he's swapping the O1 by O2 and creating another control, and then he's storing other metadata, and then he's tagging it to be a piston bone. And then when he's doing his forward solve, he's grabbing any bone that has been tagged with piston bone, and then he's doing the logic of his rig. So he's got a parent constraint. I didn't do the rig, so I'm not super familiar with how it works, but there's a bunch of parent constraint, and then he's got the logic of his piston right there. So rather than finding every piston on the skeleton, and for each of them creating a rig, creating a control, and rigging it, he's just saying, give me everything that's named piston. So if tomorrow I grab this skeleton and remove one piston or add a couple more, the rig is done. It's already done. It's already rigged because it's going to find using a naming convention. Cool. Any example of the IK-like behavior for FK? I'm hoping I can do example of IK-like behavior for FK very soon. I have some good prototypes. I haven't shared them yet, but I'm hoping I can share that with the community shortly. How could you create a control rig for a baby or a toddler? Meta-human and toddlers, I've never seen anyone doing that. I'm not going to be able to answer this question right now. When I bake my animation into this mech control rig, it seems to break the canon. Is there a fix for this? I will ask Chase. I didn't rig that character, so I do not know. All right, so we've seen this. Okay, and kind of, so now it's the part where I kind of want to talk again about what could be the future of control rig, hoping that you already see some potential in what we have today. But I want to talk about what is the next step. Modular rigging is obviously a big step for us because it's going to make everything easier. I have no problem admitting that control rig is still a little hard to adopt. I've worked with multiple riggers. Some people embrace it and have quickly understand what it is. But I have also seen some other riggers that maybe are less familiar with scripting or with the math that you need in order to do some rigging, and they're struggling a little bit more. I believe we can solve that by providing modular rigging inside the engine. I have quite a lot of experience building a modular rigging system. I did gear that was adopted by the industry and a lot of studios are using today. I've also developed a system that I was using at Blur Studio, and I can guarantee you that I had junior riggers coming out of school capable of rigging the advanced characters that we had at Blur Studio in no time. Literally, they would get a character, they will have a template, and it's like, hey, it's a biped. We already rigged bipeds 1,000 times. You don't need to reinvent anything. Just define what's special about this biped. And that's really the approach I want to have, because I mean, maybe you're working on a film that has a lot of weird creatures that we haven't seen, but I'm fairly sure that, come on, 80, maybe 90% of the characters are biped or maybe quadruped or some sort of creatures that we've seen before. And I don't think we should have to recreate everything from scratch there, because it's been done. We have seen a ton of excellent rigs that are capable of doing the things. And it's time for us to just provide solutions. And again, with the same way I'm saying that anyone technical can dive deeper into it, I think that should be true for modules as well, where I'm hoping we can share a framework, but also modules and components that anyone who wants to use them can just plug and play and go for it. But anyone who says like, it's not exactly the way I like it, can just dive into it, change what he or she doesn't like, or even create a brand new one and add to the library. We share already the standard library of functions for control rig. I think there's a potential to do the same with components. Characterization kind of go with the question we had before about, again, those are bipeds. We've seen bipeds. We know how they look like. We're trying to come up with like an idea of how do you just give it any skeleton with any naming convention, any orientation of bones, and just tell it, this is a biped, rig it. And how can it find what is the legs, what are the arms, how many fingers it has, and just go from there. We believe it's possible to find some rules and have the system know that that this is a biped and figure out what is what and go from there. And it goes back to the question, because when we get to do that, we'll definitely have to take into account that rotation might be different and that we have to adapt to make a rig that is flexible, that it can work with any kind of input rotations. And data-driven, I've already kind of mentioned it. It's already in 5.2, but I really want to push it to the next level where we can pass extra information to the rig to just be able to say, I want this, I want that, and let the system figure it out. And you have to understand that for us, the target is not riggers. It's not even animators of people who are used to that. We're trying to make this accessible to anyone who wants to play with Unreal Engine and the Fortnite creative environment. So we have people that have no idea why we even do rigging, that just have found a cool character they like online and wants to bring them into their experience and wants to be able to animate from there. That's our target. We want to get the full spectrum, where we go from people who have very little knowledge and wants to use an out-of-the-box solution, to people who wants to be able to dive in and customize it to make it the perfect tool for their production. We want to satisfy everybody with our tools. Okay, couple more questions. Do you see control rigs within Unreal ever getting to the level of rigs that are used on creature design for major motion picture, or is the real-time arena the right space for Unreal control rig? I do believe we're going to get to the same level of quality than any movie. I see no reason why not. Today, again, being totally transparent, what can you do in control rig today? Body-wise, I think I can do any rig that I've seen in my career on movies, on anything. Minus, we can talk about muscle simulation and all that stuff, but it's kind of a different topic. So rigging-wise, purely rigging, I think I can do anything on the body that I've seen anywhere else. On the face, I can technically do it, but I'm not gonna lie, it's gonna be some work. We're lacking a little bit of tools to make that pipeline very efficient. We have the MetaHuman creator, which is amazing. The quality of those facial rigs are fantastic. But if you don't want to do a realistic human, then you're kind of on your own. And I would totally agree that it can be tricky to create a full facial cartoony rig in engine today. I would probably rely mostly on blade shape today because I think rigging everything from scratch would be quite a lot of work. But that's one of my goals, to keep pushing to improve those tools, because because facial is all we care about. I mean, it's the first thing you look at, so it's more important than anything else. Okay, so Skeleton Edition, as in 5.3 that just came out a week ago, or even less than that, we can now edit Skeleton in engine, which is a big step for us because we want to minimize the amount of back and forth we have with other DCCs. And it's not that the other DCC tools are not good, it's just everything that is taking you away from the engine, it's just extra steps where potential issues and mismatch may happen. So a lot of time, if you're rigging and working on your character, we want you to be able to edit the character in engine and stay focused on your task and have all the tools you need to do that. So it's a very first version. I'm pretty happy with where we at. I think we can do much better than that. Currently, you can position your joints, you can do your weight painting. I'm hoping we can simplify the creation of bones. I'm hoping we can have blend shape creation in engine eventually as well. There's a lot of things that we can still improve, so it's just a version 1. Actually, it's even experimental. But it shows you that we're going in that direction where you will have the full control of your character in engine. Deformers is also something that I'm looking forward to that's going to be improved. I've worked a lot with the deformers on this character that I call the Jawbreaker. With this character, I had the chance to try a lot of different things to create my own deformers. The first thing is that blew my mind is how fast the deformers are. It's all GPU accelerated, and this is an important thing for us, even if sometimes it's a limitation, because we want you guys to have the real-time experience. The reason why we come to Unreal and into this game engine is so that you are in the best environment to do your animation. I know from my experience in the movie industry, like the complaint we get the most from animators was not that the rig was slow, it's just that they didn't see things in context. They didn't see things with the right lighting and the hair and where the characters was exactly looking at and the reflection in the eyes. And all that stuff, maybe not with the environment. With Unreal, you have all that potentially available to you. You can animate your characters in context, see exactly what it's going to look like, very close to the final image immediately available in your viewport. And I want the animation experience to still stay the same, where you play your animation, you just click play, and you don't have to play blast. You just see the results just by pressing play. So GPU accelerated fast deformers is very important to us, and we want to, as much as possible, keep this real-time experience as far as possible. So deformers are still a bit difficult to use, not gonna lie about that. I'm hoping we can get to a point where we have the same experience as in Control Rig, where you can quickly prototype things and see direct feedback. It's not the case today. You do have a lot of programming to do. But I think it has a tremendous potential. I had a lot of fun creating this character, and I see that as a powerful tool that is coming. Finally, interaction. Again, I want to think about how animators will interact with their rigs on a show. We've talked about those proxy controls and this type of manipulation. The thing I dislike about it today is that it's very tight to the rig because it's part of the control rig. It's something that the rigger has to plan in advance. And if it's got multiple rigs, it kind of has to copy this this behavior into multiple places. I'm hoping we can come up with a more generic solution where you can manipulate things in a different way. And I'm sorry if it's a bit abstract here, but I try to get you to think about when you grab something and just rotate it, we have different way. We could do other things. We could manipulate a character differently. Now, imagine, for example, that you animated something and your character is supposed to reach to an object and you're just that short. You're very close, but you didn't pose your body correctly and you are not touching the object that you wanted to touch. So now you have to go back and rotate your pelvis, adjust your chest, your shoulder, your arm. You animated in FK, so you have to rotate all the joints of the arm to try to reach to that thing. What if, for just a split second, you could switch your manipulation to a full body IK, and you would grab your hand, pull on it, and it will pull the whole body with it, but it will pull the controls, not just the skeleton. It will pull all the controls and position all those controls for you. I see that interesting because I've seen a lot of animators doing cleanup and touches on their animation. They're happy with the timing. They're happy with the gesture. They now have to maybe do ground control, ground plane matching. So make sure that the feet are on the ground, or they maybe wants to adjust a few little things. And usually they have all their curves. Everything is nice, but now it's time to adjust a few things, and the mode they use to animate might not be the best way to manipulate to do this final touch on the rig. So I want to think about that, about a way to manipulate your rig in a lot of different ways, still maintaining what you had, how your animation was made. I've talked about swapping animation, swapping rigs during animation. I want to take that a step further. Like, we're thinking about different ways where, like, when you bring a mocap clip and you throw your control and you bake everything, well, you kind of said that, well, it's no mocap anymore. I transferred all this information on a rig, and that's it. Now I can start from there. But if you want to go back to your mocap, you realize, I don't know, you realize that you didn't do what you wanted, and you can't really go back to your mocap. Like, I'm not even quite sure how you would do that. What about if we were able to stack a rig on top of mocap and edit that as a second pass? Offset things from your mocap, and at any times, if you wanted to go back to your mocap because you realize you screwed up something, or it's not exactly what you were looking for, you can just take those keys, delete, and it's going back to the mocap. Or what about if you animate all the shots, you get your rig, and suddenly on one shot, the character is supposed to press on something. So kind of just for those few frames, you would like to have an IK on the finger so that you get really this nice feeling of pressing. What about if you could just load a little piece of rig that would be just an IK, just for those few frames, and maintain everything else? Just load a piece of rig for just a moment and use that on your animation. So again, just some ideas on how to revisit the interaction with your rig, that I think it is time we start thinking out of the box and see those different things. Let me see questions. Let me actually just do my conclusion, and then I'll read the questions. And if you have more, you can do that. So our focus is real-time animation. We want the experience to be as fun as possible, as enjoyable, so that you don't struggle with a slow rig or not seeing your character in context. That's the #1 comment I get from people that switch to Unreal to animate. They told me that, like, on facial animating the meta-human, they told me it's amazing because I put my light and I see exactly the reflection on the eye. And if you have done shots for movies, you know how important is that. Like, the character you can be looking in the right direction, but as soon as you add this reflection, it feels like he's looking somewhere else. And so now suddenly you're blindly trying to adjust by moving your control, doing a render, and trying to adjust the things. real-time animation where you get to see things in context allows for much more efficient and much more enjoyable things. Intuitive interaction, I think I've talked quite a lot about it, but making the process as intuitive as possible. Just look at your puppet, and the way you want to manipulate it at a certain time should be available to you. You shouldn't have to switch to a different mode or have to bake everything and move around. You should be able to manipulate things in a way that's convenient for you at that moment and just resume from there. And flexible and efficient, because I want people to be able to work fast. I don't want anyone to reinvent the wheel. I think we need to be able to build on top of what everybody has created. It's driving me insane that today, in pretty much any DCC that we have, there's not a rigging system that is coming out of the box. Like, why do people keep re-rigging characters from scratch? We have done that, I don't know how many times. We need to talk about how to make those characters even better, not how to recreate your own cartoony squash and stretch things. It's time for you to look at what's unique about your character and not what has been done 1,000 times. So for me, it's really important to make things efficient and very flexible, so that anyone who wants to use it out of the box can, but anyone who wants to dive deep can also do that. All right, that's it for me. I'm going to take a look at the questions and see if I can answer some of them or maybe all of them. We'll see. Can we talk about muscle simulation with the French filter play? Because I've been caught. I'm the Frenchie. Muscle simulation, there's some research around that. The first one being the ML deformer. And how it's capable of maintaining volumes in engine. So I think there's going to be improvement in the future. This is not my domain. I don't work with that team, so I don't really have more information. But if you looked at the GDC demo we've done on that MetaHuman flexing around, I think we get pretty nice deformations, and I think it's pretty promising. So I'm pretty excited about that. What about using the underlying mesh as the surface of the control UI? Oh, yeah. So you want to be able to kind of over the geometry and not have any controls visible, but just over. Yes, I mean, we know it would be a nice thing. I think our animation product team is very interested in doing that eventually. The little pink character that you're showing, I watched a really cool YouTube video with him that showed stack deformers. Can you talk a little bit about how deformer stack in UE is going? So that video must be mine, because I didn't release this character, so I'm the only one posting videos about this guy. Stack deformers, yes. So the deformer graph is kind of a graph, but not a graph. It's a graph made of little nodes that is just code inside it. And then you can create those nodes and plug one after the other to kind of stack your deformation in a way. And that's where I'm saying it's very powerful. It can do everything I want. It's not easy to use. I consider myself pretty technical, and it was tough. And I was lucky that I had the developers helping me figure out how to use it, because it was more difficult than I wish. I have good faith. I've talked to those guys, and we are on the same page about how to make this more accessible to people, how to transform it to some sort of a deformer stack as well in the future, how to have out-of-the-box deformers that you can just drag and drop on your character and use very quickly. We have weight maps as well available now, so you can define which area of your character is going to be deformed by which deformer. So we're working on it. It's coming. It's coming. It takes time. When will we see a squash and stretch queen rig? I don't know. I mean, the Bungee Man. Well, the Bungee Man is using a slightly different rig. That would be a good project for modular rigging. Well, we could do that. We'll see. What are your thoughts on AI animation tools like Cascadeur? I love it. I love it. I think it's fantastic. I hope we can do stuff like that. I think, when I was telling you about being able to manipulate your character in full body IK just for a few frames because it's helping you in that case, I think it's great. Anything to help animators. I mean, it's going to provide you with a type of animation, probably because it's machine learning. It's going to give you more realistic results. So maybe not cartoony animation. But I think, we're trying to create tools that are accessible for anyone, from the basic user to the most advanced animators. People who can only use those type of tools can create some content, and the rockstar animators that can give life to any characters will still use all their art and knowledge to make things even more amazing. For bringing animation in the Bungie's rig, when I bake the animation, the fingers and hands become spaghettified. I'm not quite sure what that means. How can you bring saved animation already placed on a mannequin rig to a Bungie without messing up the hands? Bringing animation. Oh, so you brought animation that was not done on the Bungie Man, I would have to take a look at what's the difference in the skeleton. I'm not quite sure. I think I tried to respect the mannequin skeleton on Bungie Man, but it's possible I didn't 100%. So retargeting would be a great tool if you haven't played with those tools. They are pretty fantastic today. So you could take a look at IK Rig and Retargeter. What are your thoughts on auto rigging, and how would you recommend we approach rigging characters today? I mean, I think my whole speech is about we need auto rigging. We need tools to help you create stuff. So I don't want to reinvent the wheel one more time. I think when you bring your character, you should be able to say, this is the spine, this is the arm, this is the leg, this is the fingers, and just give me a rig and get started fairly quickly. That's the way I was working again at Blur. We had a tool, and all the rigger had to do on the first pass was just to define where are the pivots, and then the rig was done in literally less than a day and would go straight to animation, and animation could get started. After 1 day of rigging, animation was started. And during that time, we could start refining the deformations, refining rigging, like the accessories and what is unique to that character. And we did the same for facial rigging, by the way. We had a system where we could rig a face in barely any time, send that, and then refine if we needed to. So for me, again, you need to spend times on what's going to make your character outstanding and not what has been done 1,000 times. So your body rig should be something quick to do. And then once you want to make this amazing deformation, maybe you have these beautiful muscles that you want to show and stuff like that, that needs maybe a little more work, but eventually, hopefully, we can also do them very quickly. Let's automate as much as possible. Let's keep the fun stuff, the creative stuff alive, and automate everything else. What are your thoughts on AI rigging tool like Ozone by Kite? Do they use AI on Ozone? I'm maybe not super familiar. I've seen the Ozone stuff, like the deformer stack that I think is fantastic. I may not have seen the AI rigging tools. I'll check it out. What is your recommended method to keep the head of the MetaHuman attached during body and facial using MetaHuman animation with extreme fast movements? So you're having issue with the head of the MetaHuman not following the body when you're using MetaHuman Animator. That might be an issue with your animation blueprint. I'm not quite sure. The thing is, MetaHuman Animator, which again is a fantastic tool, we don't have a real-time version of it yet. So you have to bake the result to an animation sequence. And I guess I haven't looked at that yet in details. I don't know if it's coming with the neck joints animated or not, but so you may have to tell it that you want to use all the animation from the MetaHuman from the facial clip, except for the joints. So inside the animation blueprint, you have a way to blend the animation of certain joints. So you may want to kind of say use all this animation except for the neck joints and all that stuff, and then hopefully they will still be attached to the body. Something like that, I would think. I would need to take a look at the data to see exactly what's the issue. I don't see why it would be a bigger issue on fast movement than on slower movement, but yeah. When will we see a MetaHuman's face rig for custom characters? There's a few tests on the internet. They look good. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing with MetaHuman is to tackle realistic characters, and we are that's why those tools are so good, because they are very focused on what they're supposed to do, which is realistic characters. Making that working with any creatures, any cartoony face, I mean, this is just different scenarios. So if you get something out of it, it's great. But it's going to be difficult to make one solution work for any type of characters, especially very stylized or very different creatures.